To do what we do, you got to be able to take abuse. You got to be able to have people disrespecting you.
Willard Carroll Smith II. The world has called him many things across 5 decades. Fresh Prince, Will Smith, the biggest movie star on the planet, and more recently, the man at the center of one of the most defining public moments in the history of the Academy Awards.
Oh, wow! Wow!
But public chapters end, private chapters begin. And tonight, we do not come to relitigate what has already been examined from every possible angle by every possible platform. We come to do something more interesting. We come to look at what happens after. What a man of extraordinary capability, extraordinary wealth, and extraordinary self-awareness builds when the lights stop following him quite so closely. Where he goes, how he lives. What the Maryland estate tucked away from Los Angeles, from Hollywood, from the industry that made him and that he in turn reshaped, says about who Will Smith actually is when nobody is watching. Public chapters end, private chapters begin. We tour Will Smith's Maryland estate today to see how family, recalibration, and privacy shape legacy in real time. Because here is what gets lost in the noise. Will Smith in 2026 is a man with a net worth of $350 million, a production company that has generated some of the most commercially successful films and television projects of the last 20 years, a music catalog from one of the most commercially successful rap careers of the 1990s, a real estate portfolio that spans multiple states, and a family, complicated, publicly exposed, deeply human that remains the center of everything he says matters most. This is not a fall from grace. This is a man in the middle of what may be the most consequential act of his life, the act of rebuilding deliberately, privately, and on his own terms. West Philadelphia, born and raised, the origin of an empire. Willard Carroll Smith II was born on September the 25th, 1968, in West Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. His father, Willard Carroll Smith Sr., was a refrigeration engineer. His mother, Caroline Bright, was a school board administrator. His upbringing was middle class in its material circumstances and aspirationally professional in its values, a household where education was non-negotiable and performance, in every sense of that word, was expected. The musical talent revealed itself early and organically. By his mid-teens, he had partnered with DJ Jazzy Jeffrey Allen Towns, forming one of the most commercially successful hip-hop duos of the late 1980s. Their sound was deliberately accessible, where much of hip-hop at the time was moving toward harder edges and more confrontational content. DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince built something that could live on pop radio, on Saturday morning television, and in the bedroom of a 12-year-old in suburban Ohio who had never been to Philadelphia. Parents Just Don't Understand won the first Grammy ever awarded in the rap category in 1989. That Grammy, historic, genre-defining, commercially significant, was also the first signal of something that would define Will Smith's entire career. He understood mainstream. He understood cross-demographic reach. He understood intuitively and early that the widest possible audience was not a compromise of creative integrity, but a form of creative ambition that required its own specific skill set. The television offer that arrived shortly after a situation comedy loosely based on his own West Philadelphia origins was a risk that looked like a gift. He took it, and The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air ran for 6 seasons on NBC, from 1990 to 1996, turning Will Smith from a successful recording artist into a household name with a face that 100 million people recognized. He used that platform exactly as well as anyone has ever used a television platform. He transitioned to film, and the film career that followed was not just successful, it was historic. The film career that built $350 million between 1995 and 2022, Will Smith built one of the most commercially extraordinary filmographies in Hollywood history. The numbers are almost difficult to absorb when you look at them together. Bad Boys in 1995, Independence Day in 1996, a film that grossed $817 million globally and established him as one of the few actors capable of carrying a summer blockbuster on name. Recognition alone. Men in Black in 1997, $620 million worldwide. Enemy of the State, Ali, Hitch, The Pursuit of Happiness, I Am Legend, Hancock, 7 Pounds, and then the awards. Recognition that confirmed what box office receipts had been saying for a decade. 2 Academy Award nominations for Ali in 2001 and for The Pursuit of Happiness in 2006, a Golden Globe. Critical praise that positioned him as one of the most versatile leading men of his generation. King Richard in 2021 brought him to the Academy Award for Best Actor, the pinnacle of what that industry offers. The speech was emotional. The performance that earned it was genuinely masterful. The biographical portrait of Richard Williams, father and coach to Venus and Serena, drew on the same instinct Will Smith has always had for stories about family, about sacrifice, about the architecture of a father's love expressed through relentless expectation. The evening of March the 27th, 2022, began as the culmination of a career. It ended as something else entirely. What happened on that stage has been analyzed, debated, moralized over, and narrativized from every possible perspective. This documentary does not add another layer to that analysis. What it does note is the consequence, the BAFTA ban, the 10-year ban from attending the Academy Awards, the immediate collapse of multiple projects, the resignation from the Academy, and then moves to what came after. Because what came after is the more interesting story. The Maryland estate architecture of a new chapter. Will Smith's Maryland estate sits in Millersville, a community in Anne Arundel County that sits between Baltimore and Annapolis, a geography that communicates with considerable clarity, a set of priorities. This is not a Hollywood Hills property. It is not a Malibu beach house. It is not the kind of address that generates paparazzi traffic or ends up in architectural magazines without an invitation. It is, instead, a compound designed for a very specific kind of living. The kind that happens when a person who has spent 30 years at the absolute center of American public culture makes a deliberate decision to move the center of their life somewhere else. The property is substantial. A main residence of significant square footage, designed with the proportions of a family home rather than a showcase rooms built for use, not photography. The architectural style reflects East Coast traditional influences, brick and stone, pitched roof lines, the kind of construction that communicates permanence rather than trend. The grounds are expansive, wooded areas that create natural privacy without requiring walls or gates to do the work, walking paths. Open land that stretches in every direction with the particular quietness of the mid-Atlantic countryside, not the engineered silence of a soundproofed penthouse, but the organic quiet of trees and space and distance from the nearest major thoroughfare. The interior has been designed with multiple generations of the Smith family in mind. Jaden Smith, now an established artist and entrepreneur in his own right, has his own creative space within the property. The guest structures are generous, a kitchen designed not for a catering service but for the kind of family meals that actually happen when the schedule allows and the need for gathered people is real. There is a recording studio on the grounds, not a gesture, a professional facility with the kind of equipment and acoustic treatment that reflects genuine creative intention. The studio signals that Will Smith's creative life did not go into hibernation after March 2022. It relocated, it became private, and it kept working. The estate also includes a gym and training facility, because a man who has been building and maintaining the physical requirements of major action film roles across 30 years does not stop training, because the cameras have moved on. The body is a tool and a discipline, and the discipline does not take sabbaticals. The Smith family, in 2026 complexity, held with honesty. The family narrative of Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith is one of the most publicly dissected in American entertainment history. And in 2023, Jada Pinkett Smith's memoir, Worthy, added a dimension that reframed everything the public thought it understood. She revealed in that memoir, and in subsequent interviews, that she and Will Smith had been living separately since 2016, a separation that had never been publicly announced, that had continued through every public appearance they made together, and that existed, in her telling, as a privately negotiated reality between two people who had outgrown a conventional marriage while remaining deeply connected as family and as co-parents. The response to that revelation was enormous. The questions were legitimate. The complexity of what they had maintained privately while presenting something different publicly was, and remains, difficult to fully assess from the outside. What is accessible is this: 3 children, Trey, Jaden, and Willow, were raised inside whatever that structure was. And all three of them, in 2026, are functional, creative, engaged adults building their own lives with a clarity of identity that speaks well of the foundation beneath them, whatever that foundation's exact shape turned out to be. Trey Smith, Will's son from his first marriage to Cherie Zampino, has maintained a private life and a career as a DJ with genuine creative credibility. Jaden Smith, now in his mid-20s, has built an independent artistic identity that encompasses music, acting, fashion, and environmental activism that is as far from nepotism as it is possible to get, while sharing one of the most recognizable surnames in entertainment. Willow Smith is, in 2026, one of the most genuinely boundary-defying artists of her generation. Her musical evolution from Whip My Hair, released when she was 9 years old, through her alternative rock and emotional pop work of the early 2020s, through the art-forward projects she has pursued as a 20-something, represents a creative trajectory that would be remarkable under any surname. Will Smith has spoken about what fatherhood means to him, with a consistency and an emotional directness that has never felt performative. Whatever the structural complexity of his adult relationships, the relationship with his children appears to be the most stable and most intentional thing in his life. The Maryland estate, large enough for everyone, private enough for honesty, geographically removed from the pressures of the industry, reflects that priority in physical terms. $350 million how it was built and how it is protected. The published estimate of Will Smith's net worth in 2026 sits at $350 million. That number was built across multiple decades and multiple industries, and understanding its architecture helps explain why it has proven resilient in circumstances that would have financially devastated a less diversified portfolio. Music royalties and publishing. The DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince catalog, including Grammy-winning singles, multi-platinum albums, and a back catalog that has been reintroduced to younger audiences through streaming, generates passive royalty income that has never stopped. His solo career, which produced the platinum albums Big Willie Style in 1997 and Willennium in 1999, added additional publishing assets that compound quietly across every streaming platform, licensing, placement, and synchronization deal. Gettin' Jiggy With It, Miami, Wild Wild West, Men in Black. These are not nostalgia artifacts. They are active intellectual property generating income across platforms that did not exist when the songs were recorded. Overbrook Entertainment. Founded in 1997 with his business partner James Lassiter, Overbrook Entertainment is the production infrastructure behind a filmography that includes hits across multiple genres. The Pursuit of Happiness, Hitch, Ali, I Am Legend, 7 Pounds, and dozens of additional projects, many of which generated 9-figure theatrical grosses, were produced with Will Smith's company holding a producer equity position. A producer's equity position means that beyond the acting fee, which for Will Smith at his peak was $20 million per film, he received a percentage of the profits on productions his company controlled. That is a fundamentally different financial instrument than a salary. It compounds. It generates ongoing income from home video, streaming licensing, international distribution, and every subsequent rights deal the film enters into for decades. Real estate portfolio. Beyond Maryland, the Smith real estate holdings have included properties in Calabasas, California, a sprawling compound that served as the family's primary West Coast residence for years. Reports of downsizing following the Oscars fallout have been consistent, with multiple properties listed and sold. The real estate rationalization tells an interesting story. It is not financial distress. It is portfolio reconfiguration, moving away from the overhead of multiple large properties toward a more concentrated, more intentional real estate position anchored by the Maryland estate and a smaller footprint elsewhere. Brand equity and social media. In 2026, Will Smith's YouTube channel and social media presence represent a genuine business asset rather than a celebrity vanity platform. His YouTube channel, which has accumulated millions of subscribers through behind-the-scenes content, vlogs, and personal documentary-style productions, generates advertising revenue and brand partnership income that is entirely independent of his film career. This matters more than it might appear. It represents a direct-to-audience relationship, a communication channel he controls that does not require a studio's permission or a publicist's sign-off. After a period when traditional Hollywood platforms were unavailable or restricted, the direct-audience relationship became not just financially relevant, but strategically essential. The private recalibration: what 3 years of relative quiet actually looks like. From 2022 through 2025, Will Smith operated at a substantially lower public volume than at any point in his adult career. Projects were paused, deals were restructured. The promotional machinery of a major Hollywood star essentially stopped. What filled that space, from everything available in interviews, social media presence, and credible reporting, was not collapse. It was reflection, travel, time with his children. A spiritual practice that has always been present in his life, rooted in his own eclectic synthesis of religious and philosophical traditions that became more central when the external structures fell away. He traveled extensively: India, Egypt, destinations that carry specific spiritual and historical weight that suggests a man not running away from his circumstances, but actively seeking context for them. The travel, documented partially on social media, showed something that surprised some observers and confirmed what others had always believed about him. He is not a person whose well-being depends on validation from external sources. He is interested in himself, in humanity, in the questions that fame had perhaps deferred but never eliminated. His memoir, Will, published in late 2021, just months before the Oscars incident laid out, with unusual candor for a celebrity autobiography, the psychological architecture beneath the performance, the childhood experience of witnessing his father hit his mother, the way that shaped his relationship to conflict, to identity, to the relentless performance of capability and confidence, the therapy, the work, the honest self-assessment of someone who had built an extraordinary external life while carrying unresolved weight internally. Reading that memoir in the context of what came after is a different experience than reading it before. The candidness was genuine, the reckoning was real, and the private chapter that followed the most public moment of his life represents, in some meaningful sense, the continuation of a process that the memoir had already begun. The comeback trajectory: what 2026 actually looks like. Will Smith's professional reemergence has been gradual, strategic, and in the manner of a man who understands storytelling paced for maximum narrative coherence rather than maximum speed. Bad Boys? Ride or Die, the fourth installment of the franchise that launched his film career in 1995, was released in 2024 alongside co-star Martin Lawrence. The film grossed over $400 million globally. That number tells you something essential. The audience, the real audience, not the Twitter audience, not the awards industry, not the cultural commentariat, had not permanently withdrawn. They showed up, they watched, they paid. A sequel carries less artistic weight than a dramatic comeback vehicle might, but it carries more practical information about public forgiveness cycles and audience relationship durability than almost any other kind of film. And what Bad Boys, Ride or Die demonstrated was that the franchise, the face, and the chemistry between Smith and Lawrence had lost none of its commercial power. Additional projects have been in various stages of development, film roles that would require dramatic range rather than franchise comfort, projects that, when they arrive, will constitute a more definitive artistic statement about who Will Smith is in this chapter. But the Maryland estate is where the real work is happening, the work of reassembly. The work of deciding deliberately, privately, without external pressure, setting the timeline, what the next 30 years of a very large life are going to be built around. There is a specific kind of courage that does not announce itself. The courage of going quiet when the world expects volume. The courage of choosing a Maryland hillside over a Hollywood boulevard. The courage of sitting with the full weight of a public failure. Real failure, documented failure, personal failure, broadcast to 40 million people, and deciding not to run from it, but to understand it. Willard Carroll Smith II built $350 million worth of assets across 30 years of relentless creative output, commercial discipline, and the kind of sustained cultural relevance that most entertainers never approach. He built it with music and film and production and real estate and brand equity and a direct relationship with an audience that, across every platform shift and every cultural cycle, kept showing up. And now he is in Maryland, in a home designed for living rather than performing, with children who are thriving, with a creative facility on the grounds where the next chapter is quietly being written, with a net worth that has proven more resilient than the industry's appetite for a clean narrative would suggest, with a life that is, by every available measure, still full. Public chapters end. Private chapters begin. Sometimes the most important work, the deepest, most consequential, most generative work happens in private, in the in-between spaces, in the Maryland mornings when nobody is watching and the only measure of progress is internal. If this reflective tour moved you, if you believe that the story of a life is not determined by its most scrutinized moment, but by the full arc of decisions made before and after it, subscribe now. Tell us in the comments who you want us to cover, because the most interesting stories are always the ones happening just below the surface of what everyone thinks they already know. We will see you in the next one.